Amidst persistent trade tensions involving substantial United States tariffs against Chinese exports, China's leader Xi Jinping commenced a significant diplomatic engagement in Southeast Asia, beginning with a state visit to Vietnam. This tour unfolds within an economic context where 145% U.S. duties remain on many Chinese goods, despite temporary pauses affecting some items. Upon arrival in Hanoi, Xi Jinping received notable state honors, including a reception by Vietnam's President Luong Quang and cultural performances, signaling the importance attached to the visit by the host nation. Coinciding with his arrival, Xi articulated a clear stance against trade conflict through official media channels, stating unequivocally, "There are no winners in a trade war or a tariff war." This declaration, presented alongside calls to safeguard the multilateral trading system and ensure stable global supply chains, frames China's position as seeking stability in contrast to the tariff actions initiated by the United States. The confluence of this high-level diplomatic activity and its pointed messaging against trade conflict invites a detailed look at the operational dynamics and strategic calculations at play during this Southeast Asian tour. Within the halls of power in Hanoi, this message of stability was reinforced through direct engagement. Xi Jinping held discussions with key figures, including Vietnam's Communist Party General Secretary To Lam and Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh. During these meetings, the rhetoric centered on mutual commitment to peaceful development and cooperation as anchors in a turbulent global environment, explicitly positioning the Sino-Vietnamese relationship as a source of certainty. Tangible outcomes emerged alongside the diplomatic overtures. Agreements were formalized, notably the acceleration of an $8 billion railway project connecting the two nations, a significant infrastructure initiative approved earlier in the year. While specifics of other memorandums remained undisclosed, the focus on enhancing physical connectivity underscores a shared interest in facilitating trade and movement, irrespective of external economic pressures. Vietnam's position in this dynamic is inherently complex. Operating under a one-party communist system akin to China's, it simultaneously cultivates robust ties with the United States. This intricate balance was vividly illustrated in 2023 when Hanoi hosted both U.S. President Biden and Xi Jinping, subsequently elevating the diplomatic relationship with Washington to its highest tier, placing it on par with both Beijing and Moscow. Economically, the interdependence is profound. China stands as Vietnam's largest trading partner, with bilateral commerce experiencing a notable surge of 14.6% year-on-year in 2024. Furthermore, Vietnam has been a significant recipient of manufacturing shifts as businesses seek alternatives to China-centric supply chains. This very success, however, places Vietnam under scrutiny, particularly from the U.S., regarding concerns that it might function as a conduit for Chinese goods, a factor contributing to previous U.S. tariff actions against Vietnamese products before the recent pause. Therefore, Xi Jinping's visit, his second to Vietnam since assuming leadership in 2013, occurs at a critical juncture. It serves not only as a platform to articulate China's stance on global trade, but also as a practical effort to strengthen regional partnerships and explore avenues to navigate the substantial economic barriers erected by U.S. tariffs. The subsequent stops planned in Malaysia and Cambodia further indicate a broader regional strategy aimed at reinforcing economic linkages and political alliances throughout Southeast Asia during this period of heightened trade friction. This maneuvering takes place even as underlying long-term issues, such as territorial disputes in the South China Sea, persist between Beijing and Hanoi, albeit often managed away from the public spotlight. Yet the portrayal of China as a stabilizing force advocating for multilateralism exists in direct counterpoint to the operational reality of significant U.S. tariffs targeting Chinese goods. While Xi Jinping critiques trade wars, the United States under President Trump implemented substantial duties, characterizing the Sino-American economic relationship as deeply contentious. Analysts observe that this diplomatic tour allows Beijing to project an image of responsible global engagement, implicitly contrasting its approach with Washington's more confrontational trade posture, particularly as perceived within Southeast Asia. For the nations within this region, the situation presents a complex dilemma. On one hand, the prospect of intensified U.S. tariffs generates considerable anxiety, potentially disrupting development plans and economic stability, as noted by regional experts. On the other hand, China's concurrent outreach, exemplified by investments like the Vietnam-China Railway project and Xi's visit itself, offers avenues for continued economic partnership and integration, presenting a different set of opportunities and dependencies. This dynamic places countries like Vietnam in a delicate balancing act, reaping economic advantages from supply chain diversification while simultaneously facing potential negative consequences stemming from the U.S.-China conflict. The very factors that make Vietnam attractive for businesses relocating from China also increase its vulnerability to U.S. measures aimed at preventing the circumvention of tariffs on Chinese products, highlighting the precarious nature of its position between the two economic giants. Thus, the strategic landscape is defined by these interwoven yet often opposing forces: the pursuit of economic benefit against the backdrop of geopolitical rivalry, and the public affirmation of cooperation alongside persistent, underlying strategic divergences. Delving further into the operational objectives, this diplomatic engagement serves as a mechanism for China to explore practical means of mitigating the impact of punitive U.S. trade measures. The strengthening of relationships with Vietnam and subsequently Malaysia and Cambodia provides potential avenues for reinforcing regional supply chains and exploring economic configurations less vulnerable to bilateral tariffs imposed by Washington. Initiatives like the Accelerated Railway Project exemplify a move towards greater physical and economic integration, facilitating trade flows within the region, which could, in turn, offer resilience against external economic pressures directed primarily at China. However, this push for deeper economic linkage occurs simultaneously with the persistence of significant, unresolved security issues. The long-standing territorial disputes in the South China Sea represent a fundamental point of friction between Beijing and Hanoi, involving documented confrontations at sea, even if these incidents are not consistently brought to public attention. Managing these conflicting dynamics, deepening economic partnership while navigating strategic mistrust and security competition, requires careful statecraft from all parties involved, often necessitating a compartmentalization of economic cooperation from security concerns. This complex interplay shapes the choices available to Southeast Asian nations. Their engagement with China, despite underlying security apprehensions, is driven by significant economic imperatives and the perceived benefits of regional integration projects. The desire to maintain relationships with multiple major powers provides diplomatic flexibility and economic opportunity, even as it exposes them to the cross-currents of the broader U.S.-China strategic competition. Stepping back, these engagements reflect the broader geopolitical landscape where Southeast Asia serves as a crucial arena for strategic competition. Xi Jinping's tour, underscored by significant economic commitments and pronouncements against trade conflict, represents a concerted effort by China to consolidate its influence and present itself as a reliable, long-term partner for regional development, particularly as nations navigate the uncertainties stemming from U.S.-China tensions. The emphasis on infrastructure, like the Vietnam-China Railway, points towards a strategy aimed at deepening regional economic integration centered around China. This works to physically and economically anchor neighboring countries more closely to the Chinese market, potentially creating dependencies, but also offering tangible development pathways distinct from those emphasized by Western partners. This dynamic forces regional states into continuous calculations regarding alignment and advantage. Their decisions, whether seeking closer ties with Beijing, reinforcing partnerships with Washington, or attempting to maximize benefits from both, shape the evolving architecture of power and influence across the Indo-Pacific. Vietnam's sophisticated diplomatic maneuvering, accommodating high-level visits from both major powers within the same year and maintaining strong ties across the ideological spectrum, exemplifies the complex strategies smaller states employ to preserve autonomy and pursue national interests within this competitive environment. Ultimately, the tour and its associated messaging contribute to the ongoing narrative contest. China actively portrays its engagement as mutually beneficial and stabilizing, contrasting this with the perceived volatility and unilateralism of U.S. tariff actions. The reception and responses within Southeast Asia to these competing approaches will continue to be a critical indicator of shifting regional alignments and the future trajectory of global trade and geopolitical power. Therefore, the diplomatic activities observed in Hanoi and extending across Southeast Asia are more than ceremonial exchanges. They represent tangible maneuvers within a high-stakes environment defined by economic conflict and strategic realignment. China's assertion that trade wars yield no victors is deployed precisely as it seeks to fortify regional economic bonds and mitigate the operational effects of substantial U.S. tariffs. Simultaneously, nations like Vietnam navigate this complex terrain, leveraging economic opportunities presented by both Beijing and Washington while managing inherent geopolitical risks and unresolved territorial disputes. The outcome of these interactions, the deepening economic connections, the careful diplomatic balancing, and the persistent underlying strategic friction, demonstrates the intricate reality facing Southeast Asia. It is a region actively shaping its future amidst the competing pressures of global powers, where immediate economic calculations coexist with long-term security considerations, rendering the unfolding dynamics crucial indicators of the evolving international order. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this analysis, and be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more geopolitical insights like this. I love hearing your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Share this video with anyone interested in deeper perspectives on current events. Until next time, stay informed and think critically. Thank you.